This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we'll discuss psychological and emotional issues common in today's world and what to do about them. I'm Dr. Margaret, and SelfWork is a podcast dedicated to you taking just a few minutes today for your own self-work. Hello and welcome back to SelfWork. I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford, and I'm so excited about bringing you a friend of mine and someone that I truly admire, Becky Blades. I wanted to offer you the advice and very creative teachings of Becky today. Not only has she founded and sold an award-winning communications firm, she's basically run from the boardroom to the homeroom. She's an artist herself, and she's an inspiring and highly creative author of 2 books. Now, the first one was Do Your Laundry or You'll Die Alone, subtitle being Advice Your Mom Would Give If She Thought You Were Listening. She not only wrote and illustrated that book, it was named a best book of 2014 and one of the top 100 indie releases by Kirkus Reviews. And it received the prestigious Kirkus Starred review and was an Amazon bestseller for 6 consecutive years. That is a long time. Now she's written another wonderfully illustrated book, again, her own drawings and illustrations, entitled Start More Than You Can Finish. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wanted it to be a real fresher-upper for those of you who are wilting in this heat of the summer, or if you're in another hemisphere, fending off one more winter storm. Her point in this book is that we can get so afraid of failing, we don't start, and starting is so important. In fact, she advocates being a Startist. And this book also has high praise. It's been named a must-read by the Next Big Idea Club, which, by the way, the members of that club are Malcolm Gladwell, Adam Grant, Susan Cain, and Daniel Pink. Not bad company. And they call it one of the most essential nonfiction books of the year. It is truly inspiring. She calls herself a bad cook, a hopeful gardener, a passionate tree hugger, and a licensed private pilot. And I'm delighted not only to have her on SelfWork, but I'm lucky enough, like I said, to call her a friend. Before we hear Becky's interview, let's hear from BetterHelp. So many people start or go back to therapy when their kids are starting school, and that's not too long from now. So everyone's starting something new. I'd recommend calling very early for a therapist in your locale, but with BetterHelp, you don't have to worry about that. They're ready to see you when you're ready to be seen. I recently heard a fascinating reframe for the idea of asking for help. Maybe you view asking for help as something someone does who's falling apart or who isn't strong. So consider this. What if asking for help means that you won't let anything get in your way of solving an issue, finding out an answer, or discovering a better direction? Asking for help is much more about your determination to recognize what needs your attention or what is getting in your way of having the life you want. BetterHelp, the #1 online therapy provider, makes reaching out about as easy as it can get. Within 48 hours, you'll have a professional licensed therapist with whom you can text, email, or talk with to guide you. And you're not having to comb through therapist websites or drive to appointments. It's convenient, inexpensive, and readily available. Now you can find a therapist that fits your needs with BetterHelp. And if you use the code or link betterhelp.com/selfwork, you get 10% off your first month of sessions. So just do it. You'll be glad you did. That link again is betterhelp.com/selfwork to get 10% off your first month of services. And now I'm delighted, absolutely delighted, to introduce you, if you don't already know her, to Becky Blades. I was trying to remember when you and I met. Was it at a Midlife Bloggers?
It was at Blog Her in San Jose.
That's right. That's right.
And it was my first one. Did you go to a lot of those?
No, I think I went to 2. I went to the one there. I went to one in Chicago, I think, and then I went to that one. I didn't go to any more.
And who invited me were Mary
Dale Harrington and
Lisa Heffernan, and I had just put out that first book. And I did, gosh, I'm, everybody I met there was so nice. And I just have still loved maintaining those relationships.
Listen, I was so glad that I took the time to read all of your book, because I just laughed and I smiled and I teared up a couple of times, and you had me from the very beginning. Your artwork is just incredible. A line is a dot that wasn't, this is what you say, a line is a dot that wasn't afraid to get started. I mean, that's like, I loved that.
Yeah. And a dot can be a splatter. I mean, dots don't need to be neat, perfect little dots. They can be little cuddles.
I didn't remember that until then I refreshed my memory and I wrote it, that you're an author, but you're an artist, and you really love combining those things. And why don't you tell SelfWork listeners a little bit about you?
Okay. Yeah. I had a career in public relations, which came out of a degree in journalism. And so I've always liked writing. I didn't like being poor. So journalism wasn't, the job that I wanted out of school. I grew up poor. So I chose to find a way to make money. And in the agency business, the journalism, public relations, agency business, there were a lot of opportunities for creativity. So I started my own firm when I was 30.
Wow.
And ran that for 13 years. And then when I kind of parenting was at a pitch that I wanted to be home and in my creative space at home more too, sold the business and started building what we now call a portfolio lifestyle. So I had the business.
Oh, I like that name. I've never
office.
heard that.
Yeah. And then I had an art studio, and I remember to kind of jump over to this book when one time soon after I sold the business, my daughters were talking. They came home from school and they wanted an identity for me because, kids talk.
Yeah,
you have a working
your mother
mom,
do?
What does your mom do? So my youngest said, Mom, what are you? Are you an artist? Are you a business person? And I said, honey, why do those labels matter? And her sister from the other room said, she's a Startist. Because I was starting some other businesses, and they got confused by how I dress different days. So during that time, I went through my first and second midlife crises. First, that empty nest crisis that you know and have been such a great expert on. My first book was Do Your Laundry or You'll Die Alone. And that was the subject line of the email I sent my daughter of all these journal entries with advice that I was kind of afraid to give her in person. So after she left for college, I sent it all to her. And then, after that, I don't mind saying I'm 64 now. And these past 10 years of being kind of, almost the entire time empty nested, has given me the chance to really see how, what I love and who I love spending time with. And I've realized it's people like you who, when they think they want to do a podcast, they'll just haul off and start it. Or people who have ideas and act on them. So,
and the name of this book is Start More Than You Can Finish. And I so agreed with it. One of the things that I say to patients all the time is it doesn't matter where you go. It's that you go.
Exactly.
Just go. Just make a choice. Just go. And I was just humming along with your book thinking, I agree.
That is good. And it's been fun to think about the mental health aspects. Of course, to make the case for something that seems as contrarian as this notion of start more than you can finish, kind of in defiance of what our parents may have said. But the mental health aspects of creativity, we're learning more and more, as you know, about how creativity makes us flourish and thrive, and then we have other things we can talk about: anxiety, depression, as I studied the neuroscience of it, I decided, I discovered hidden benefits that I didn't know I'd been partaking in.
Wow. What are those?
Well, starting with self-discovery, self-esteem, getting out of anxiety and depression. I'll tell you a story that it didn't make it in the book, and I haven't told many people because it seems like kind of a downer, and we wanted the book to be upbeat. But part of my catalyst for writing the book was I was taking art lessons to domestic violence shelters. I did this for a few years. I didn't call it art therapy. Now they did, because all art is therapy, but I'm not a licensed therapist or an art therapist. But what I discovered in my time with those amazing women is that the thing that spectrum of creativity, I used to think it was started with, oh, I'm not creative, and ended with, oh, I can start anything on a dime. Well, the spectrum really starts way over in a place where we feel totally powerless, totally devoid of even knowing what we like, what gives us joy, what our idea of beauty is, and our inability to make a decision. So this book is about starting. It's taking that first step. Like you said, it's not where you go, it's that you go. And the example is in the very first class, these women, all of them, could not even make that first initial decision. I would kind of lay out a little project, very simple. I had all these enticing art supplies, but they literally needed my permission to choose a color. Like, well, should I start with purple? Yes, purple would be a great place to start. But they had literally had the creativity beaten out of them, because creativity it's trusting our own ideas and owning them, and then also having the courage to experiment and say, okay, what if purple doesn't work? Well, when we're terrified, when we're traumatized, when we're stuck, I don't think we have the courage to know that the stakes aren't that high. If I choose purple and I don't like it, I can paint over it.
Sure, of course.
Or as I said, I'll give you another piece of paper.
That's a great point. It's that shutting down of risk, of no matter how tiny the risk, or seemingly tiny. It's not tiny to them. It's like, right. I'm going to make a choice, and it's going to be out here for other people to see. And yeah, it's
right.
But
they may not know. I think when we're beaten down, we don't know what the risks are. There's this free-floating sense of, I'm taking a chance. I'm doing something didn't do yesterday. So what might happen? Because, life doesn't treat us rationally. And for those women who had been, abused, they had been abused for much less things than making a wrong color decision. Right. So the healing, so to, get back to your first big question, was the ancillary benefits of acting on our ideas and following that creative process are things we don't even know we need, I think. And I could really see it dramatically with those women who, and this was another really fun thing, is that they came out of that so fast, so joyfully.
Really?
In just a few weeks, you just give that affirmation that, yeah, purple would be great, and that looks great. And you know what? This other color might work too. And then they start with their own self-talk. And they just, those stays in those shelters aren't that long. So I only got to see them for a short period of time, but it was fast and miraculous.
That's incredible. I got my start in this business by volunteering at a domestic shelter.
Oh, so you
I
get
learned
it.
so much, so much. Anyway, I'm going to quote you again. It's not that finishing isn't vital and great, but not finishing is not failure. And I love that because, you know, how many times have I heard the phrase, well, that didn't work out? Like, that says something bad about me. I mean, you asked in the book to make a list of, you know, the things we've started and didn't finish. And my first 2 marriages came to mind immediately. I finished them, but not in the way that I thought I was going to. I carried those around with such shame for so long that wasn't okay. And it's not ideal perhaps, but I learned something along the way. And then, but I love the fact that in the book, you also take time to say, all right, stop reading or, you know, whatever. And let's apply this. What can you do? What can you do with your, and you have 4 stages. You imagine, think, decide, and act. Which, you know, I think when a lot of people hear the word, well, just imagine. That feels like real shaky ground to just imagine. What do you think?
And if we imagine, and some people are really good at that part, but some people, that is the toughest part because they imagine very small. They only imagine with the reality that they can touch and hold right then. Some people are great imagining and they imagine backwards. You know, they only pull from what they've already been able to do. So what I do with those 4 steps was research and find out how to do them better to start better and start more. So imagining, it really comes down to imagining more and bigger. The more we noodle and think about how things might be, a future reality, which we're all going to have. You know, we're going to have a future anyway.
Yeah.
So why not imagine it in it's all its glorious colors and possibilities?
You know, I'm thinking about your work on dreams with Startists. I love that book. That's a great word. You should thank your daughter, because it says to write down your dreams. But then you very quickly said, "But I don't have enough something. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough talent. I don't have whatever it is that you convince yourself to stop dreaming."
Exactly. It's the answer to the question. The answer to the question, why haven't you started that thing? And I asked actual people, art students of mine, very creative people, after they told me something they wanted to do, I asked them why they hadn't started. And the answer was always, I don't have enough blank. They would word the answer many different ways.
Sure.
It could be confidence. Like, I don't think I can do it. You don't have enough confidence.
Right.
Enough permission, enough validation. You know, space and permission could be just from your family to think that you could take the time away for yourself to do that. I call that enough permission. You know, and obviously money and time are the big ones.
Sure.
But we do have enough to start those things. That was the big learning. I think the big aha in the research was, if you've started anything, like, you probably didn't know that you'd be doing a podcast for this long. P.S. I've decided I can never do a podcast. I so respect the ability to all the skills that come into this. But when you started your first one, a Startist only thinks mostly about how I will start it, how I will do the first step. Yeah. And that is the healthy way. If you think your finish was to get it produced and get it picked up by a big syndicate, you would not think you had enough of whatever to do that.
I was determined to do at least 8 podcasts because I was told in my class that was the average number of podcasts that people do before they finish, before they start.
Really? 8? Wow.
8. And so when I got to 9, I thought, oh, right.
See, there you go. And what if you hadn't known those numbers? That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I just, the support you give in the book and the humor and the asking people to look at themselves, you sort of break down these 4 parts: the imagine, think, decide, and act. And you, you said thinking brings ideas to life, not overthinking. What do you mean by that?
Not overthinking. Well, you may be familiar with, all the research that says that we are programmed, how would you state it? That we are engineered for security as species. We're engineered for survival. So there's a natural avoidance to risk, which is healthy. Mm-hmm. So if we let ourselves think too long, so we go to that imagining place and we're very successful and imagine something wonderful, then the next step is we think about it. We think about how that future state looks into reality. How would we do it? Where would we start? How long will it take? Who do I need to, kind of warn about this?
Sure.
It is that process where we talk ourselves out of it. And we really do a number on ourselves. And the more perfectionistic a person is, the better or worse they do that part. So, I say, imagine more, think less. Because the truth is that even if you plan, if your thinking involves this elaborate, detailed plan, the minute you start something, that plan changes.
I wrote reality, that down and circled it.
Reality is a big old truth pill, and we cannot predict it.
Mm-mm. No, we cannot. So, I have that in red, circled in red. Plans change as soon as you start. And you also there was a section that I maybe because of my theater experience, but you talked about how there are tenets of improvisation that are really important for Startists. Mm-hmm. And I've done a little bit of improvisation, and it's not easy because one of these things that you brought up, you have to just say yes and. It's a rule of agreement. And then you don't tell. There are no mistakes, and you stay in the moment. Like you said, it's like somebody can just start. An audience member will say, okay, we're going to talk about diaries and cowboys.
Yeah.
And so somebody has to start something about a diary and a cowboy. And it may not make any sense. It's like you have no idea where they're going, but you say something and you bring along, and then there was another cowboy, but he had a black horse, but he wanted a white. I mean, it's just it's yeah. And then the story evolves, and so I loved that. Maybe I don't know, is it an analogy, a metaphor that this creation is like improv?
And the best quote I heard in my interviews with those people is, it's about what we do, but mostly it's about what we do with what we did. So that first step, again, the stakes are reduced. You just got to do something. It's throwing the mud on the wall. It's on an improv stage. There are like 5 actors. Somebody has to say the first thing. Mm-hmm. That takes courage, but really the hardest job is the person that says the second thing.
Sure.
They have or maybe it's the easiest because then you have something to respond to. So we need to give ourselves something to respond to really flesh out our ideas. Mm. And I mean, I also learned that all kind of comedy really works like that because, finding out what makes other people laugh is an exploration. You think, oh, this might make me laugh, but you don't know because you're hearing it in your own head. So
exactly.
My husband's taken to doing open mic nights. And
that's brave.
That is brave. It's also brave to be in the audience of those because it's usually young men who have lost their mothers laughing at them. So they don't know what's funny, but they're willing to at late night climb on a stage and tell jokes in poor taste. But what happens is that's how comedy's worked out. And even the best joke writers, go on stage over and over again before
Test
they will
it out.
go
They test it.
lifetime. Yeah. And tweak this and try that and shorten this. And that's, that is the creative process. It's iterative, it's exploratory, it's curiosity. And I mean, I think mental health wise, I too believe when I am mentally healthy, I am my most curious.
Exactly.
When we're shut down, we're not curious.
Well, it's also an external energy. It's going energy from internally, it's traveling externally when you're curious. Because you are either, whether it's how you make a good glass of iced tea, I'm sitting here looking at my iced tea, or whether it's, I'm interested in what those green books are behind her. You're engaging with something. Maybe it's an idea or a person or a thing. That's not, but your focus is outward.
I never thought of that way.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Which is a antidote to depression for sure. And in many ways, anxiety, because you have to be in the moment. You have to be, whereas anxiety puts you into the future. So, tell me what you learned about yourself in writing this book.
Oh gosh, I learned that the very beginning of the research was learning that all of my unfinished business, and I'm doing air quotes visually here, were treasures. And that when we rarely let ourselves dig back into the things that didn't go forward, even things I didn't consider failures or unfinished, I just forgot about them. I just saw the link to how they made me who I am. And the big finishes in my life, the big finishes, always had some roots in some unfinished business. I found my college art supplies. When you write and make art, you have all these records back there. Now, you may not have in other types of curiosity and other types of creativity like gardening or cooking. You may forget those things you tried. And so I think what I learned is I need to memorialize and celebrate my starts more. And I do now. The rationale for this book was to help other people that don't act on their ideas and make those people more fun companions in a way. And one of the things I found is after I sold my business, people were saying to me, like, well, what are you doing now? What have you finished lately? They didn't use those words, but I could hear that people thought I had a lot of plate spinning. I do have a lot of plate spinning. That's something I'm good at. I'm good at starting things. And, maybe I could be the world expert because I have all those failures and now they're documented. I do probably have ADD. There are maybe not the... I was
just about to ask you about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do not let people shame me about things that I started that are in a pause button. Mm-hmm. Because when we, like the big, lovely lesson or gift I hope this book gives people is that there is every benefit and very low price to trying something and setting it aside for another day, for trying it and finding out, hey, I don't really like that. I have a couple of big things I could have
totally... Not what I thought it would be or whatever.
Or I scratched that itch and I'm good. And it's just a glorious way to live. And that's how I want to live the rest of my life. And I want to do it with people who feel the same way and are not, and that feed off of me and I feed off of them. So after my first book, you may have experienced this too. People will come to you who have the same kind of dreams. Maybe they want to start a practice, start a podcast, start a book. And they'll say, I saw your book. I think I could write a book like that. And so I would say, oh gosh, you should. Advice is personal. Everybody could write an advice book. And about 1 in 10, and this bears out in other research, about 1 in 10 people will actually act on an idea that's even fully formulated. And I would try to help them. And you could just see that the others that were not going to act on it, they had taken it as far as they wanted to go, and there was not a whole lot you could do for them. So that's what I want to change. They had, is that mindset that says, I can't start it unless I have made room in my life to be an author. I can't start a book unless I've made room in my life to add a writing practice, find a publisher, whatever they think writing a book is.
Yeah.
And so
and it's funny. I had lunch with someone that was interested in the TEDx process and was asking me about it. And she's starting to write a book or she wants to, and she was asking me all about that. And this is a very, I feel like I'm having the same conversation twice this morning or this afternoon. Because she is kind of at that place of, well, I don't know how I'm going to make room for it. I want to do it. And I have had this idea for a long time, and I looked at her and I said, start this afternoon.
Did you?
Yes.
Good for you.
I said, if you've got 10 minutes, just take 10 minutes.
Exactly.
And just start jotting down some ideas. And you don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to corral the time or say, okay, I'm going to do this it's like, if you just put some consistent energy into it, it's going to grow. It's just exactly watering the idea every now and then so that it can sustain you with time away from it. But you also, when you get back to it, you go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And
exactly,
it's kind of refreshing. It's like starting a conversation and realizing the more you have it, the more you really value it, and that it's adding something. So
it's like sort of the Zeigarnik effect, which I wrote about a little.
Yes, I had never heard of that.
And it's just what you said. Once you make it real, once you tell your brain, we're going to do this, or I have a problem. If we accept it and don't say, like those 9 out of 10 people said, I'm probably not going to do this. If you're one of the ones that said, okay, I'm writing a book, whatever you declare as starting, maybe that's writing your first 2 sentences. Our brain tells us, our brain gets the message that they're on the job.
Yeah.
And subconsciously, we are homing devices to pieces of information, to problem solving help, to meeting people. You meet somebody and you think, oh, like, did they just say something about a book? Are they an author? We wonder, we think there's new information coming out. We're just zeroed into it.
Sure.
And that happens all the time in our lives. And that effect, it's also responsible for the thing that happens after we're done with something. Like we're done studying for a test, we take the test, it's over, and all that information just dumps out.
It just goes away.
Well, consider the opposite of that true for something that we've started and we haven't finished. So if you take that smallest first step, declare it started, the world gives us a bling bag full of gifts. And that's really why I say that the more we start, the better. And even if we start things that are very short term and finish them, start a limerick, start a soup, things that we, but declare that muscle in ourselves that says, just like it was your instinct to say, start this afternoon. Very few people would say that, but it's that instinct that gets our ideas out and flowing.
Mm-hmm. I really felt very supported. And I think if you're interested in this and you want to get Becky's book, it's not a hard read at all. What is compelling about it to me is that it does go against so much of what many of us are taught, that you don't want to start something and not finish it, because that means that you're wasting time or you're wasting energy. You should shame yourself for that, and rather than saying, well, what did I learn when I started that? I learned this, and so when I start the next thing, I may start it a little differently, or I don't know. I mean, it just gives you information. One of the things that I have people say to me all the time when they're trying to make changes, they'll say, well, this isn't really a big deal. But I go, wait. Yes, it is. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
What you're just about to say is a big deal.
Yeah. And a clarification on the finish. Start more than you can finish. Because you brought up divorces in that example of something that wasn't finished or could have been called failure. Because what's the finish? What I'd like to say, it doesn't make a very pithy title, but start more than you can finish just exactly as you plan to. Everything has its finish, but
great point.
We don't start because we don't think we can finish as planned. If somebody said you're going to have 8 years with a person who you love for 6 of them, and you learn all these things from each other, maybe you can make that decision to not start because you didn't like that finish. But that's not how things work. And relationships are very creative undertakings. So in many ways, a relationship is a very good example of a courageous, creative start. So anyway, it's not don't finish. Finishing is always the end game. We wouldn't, you don't start something you don't want to finish, but it's just trying to trick that. Because I think when our parents said, don't start more than you can finish, don't bite off more than you could chew, they did not make us finish more. They only made us start less.
Right.
They just didn't want a mess left out.
Right. Wow. I wonder how you think this affects the younger generations, this don't start, because one of the things that I read a lot about, and then I have a 28-year-old, so I'm somewhat in touch with hopefully in touch with what's in his world, is that they have not, there's been so much comparison with what other people have started around the world, where I knew maybe somebody in Little Rock, in Arkansas, and I was in Pine Bluff, and I didn't know what somebody was doing in Bangkok or Toronto or California. I knew my little group of friends, and that was it. And yet, so maybe some of this don't start anxiety is also about, well, what am I, how do I compare what I'm starting to what somebody else is starting, or whatever?
The biggest learning I had about that in this generation, and remember, this book was pretty much done when COVID hit. And the data then on business starts, particularly by young people, was on a 25-year decline.
Really?
And the research showed that really came from how we're raising our kids. We no longer say, yes, Joey, you can have a lemonade stand. I don't have time to help you, but go for it. No, now we are over-parenting. We are trying to get kids in the right schools. So my kids didn't do a lemonade stand after they were 4 because they were on club soccer teams or the debate team, because maybe they could get a scholarship. We have very structured instead of free-range childhoods.
Right.
So how do you, it just is a subliminal message that there's not time for your ideas because you have to follow society's schedule. That's my hunch. And I think it's tragic. So, but they have to, and then COVID necessitated this boom in business starts, because a business start is also, your son starting a freelance business because he has to in COVID. Now, it remains to be seen whether those starts will be sustained or whether they were just out of necessity. But that is that is a reason for this rally cry, is that our kids are going to need to start whole careers for themselves. I mean, we know things aren't going back the way they were. So that startistic energy and confidence needs to be nurtured, and they've got to reduce their risks of trying something, not liking it, and then trying
falling
something
on your
else.
face. I mean, it's just, oh, well, this didn't work out quite as way I thought. Yeah,
exactly.
And then again, start something else. So, yeah. Well, I love your book. Again, it's called Start More Than You Can Finish, a creative permission slip to unleash your best ideas. The art is absolutely delightful in it. And
I'm so
adds
glad.
to the enjoyment and pleasure of the book. I told you that I didn't want to interview you last week because I had not had a chance to actually read all of it. And I was so glad that I took the time.
I am too.
I just had this real excitement about it, and I hope SelfWork listeners will check it out and see what it holds for you. And Becky, I couldn't thank you more for being on SelfWork. Thank you so very much.
It was so fun to reconnect. Thank you, Dr. Margaret.
You betcha. I know you enjoyed that interview. Isn't Becky absolutely fantastic? I want to remind you that we now have episode transcripts at the end of every episode of SelfWork. I don't know why I haven't done that in the past. It's really been far easier to do it than I imagined. And so I apologize in many ways to those of you who may struggle with hearing like I do, because I have tinnitus. And if I can find a way to add in other episode transcripts, I will. But at least for now, each episode of SelfWork has its own episode transcript. I also want to remind those of you who maybe haven't subscribed to my website at drmargaretrutherford.com. You can get a free ebook called The 7 Commandments of Good Therapy. But most importantly, you get one weekly newsletter from me, just one. And it offers to you both my weekly blog post, which some of you may be interested in reading. I write one still every week, or sometimes we revamp an old one to bring it up to speed and make it applicable to today. And then, of course, this podcast and any other news or information that I think you might be interested in. Love to have you join. You can subscribe at the website. So now the subscription, or the subscribe now, is basically embedded when you scroll through the website. It's much easier than it was, and I hope far less irritating. But I'd love to have you as a member of my newsletter. Thank you to those of you who've listened to my TEDx talk. As I record this, we are right at 63,000 views, and wow, that's incredible. So keep them coming if you can. If you haven't watched, I'd so appreciate you going to YouTube, Dr. Margaret Rutherford, and TEDx, and you'll get the talk. Or you can go to my Instagram page and you'll see it in the links. That's Instagram.com/Dr. Margaret Rutherford. Thanks so much for being here again. My immense gratitude to you, and I hope this and every episode is helpful to you. Please take care of yourself, your family, and your community. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been SelfWork.